Our final speaker today began his funeral service career in 1973 in his hometown of Sterling, Illinois. He holds degrees in mortuary science, a BS degree in business quality management, an executive MBA, and is currently a student of biblical and theological studies. Dave held funeral director and embalming licenses in both Missouri and Kansas. He joined Batesville Casket Company in 1997 as a Kansas-based sales consultant, later serving North Texas for 8 years in the same role. He's a regional sales director in both Michigan and the Midwest regions and served 5 years as a manager of sales training prior to his retirement in 2019. Dave also has numerous Batesville awards, and please join me in welcoming Dave Shank.
Thank you, buddy. Good morning. My compliments to GCA and the Southern for an outstanding conference. I tell you what, I've gotten around in the few years I've been in this business, and this is one of the most well-run and just executed conferences that I've been a part of. So it's a privilege. I am passionate and I'm an advocate for funeral service. But I'm going to take it one step forward, and that is I am an advocate for funeral service that's empathetic. We do a great job of being sympathy providers and telling families that we're serving how sorry we are for their circumstances. But taking it to the next level is a whole new ballgame. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we move forward today. I'm thrilled to learn a little bit about NASCAR. And it's been fun, it's been great. It was great last night to go out to Daytona International Speedway, have an event there, and learned a lot. But I will tell you that preparing for these remarks today has been intriguing and it's been exciting, and I hope you'll be able to take a few things from it as well. So I will tell you that the things that we're going to talk about today, you can apply in your business and you can apply in your personal life. And so really this information will apply to everybody in the hall, including exhibitors and administrators and all of that. Before I begin, let me just tell you that I had an interesting start to funeral service. It all began back in the mid-1930s when a young man from Sterling, Illinois and a young woman from Freeport, Illinois met for the very first time and began a courtship from a graveside funeral service. No kidding, Mom and Dad, that's where they met. My dad was bold enough to say, "Lois, can I drive you home?" 50 miles to Freeport, and that's exactly how their courtship began. So I have one brother that's 8 years older than me that got into funeral service, and so I kind of followed him into the business as well. And we used to joke with Mom and Dad, "Hey, are you surprised? I can't imagine why you're so surprised that 2 out of the 4 kids you had turned into funeral service because you met at a graveside funeral, right?" There's another reason, though, that I really got into funeral service, and that's the losses that I experienced in my youth. I was really thankful that Mom and Dad said, "We're not going to keep you from going. Do you want to go?" And I think very early on, at like age 6 and 7, I started going with them. If people died at church, I knew them. We went to the service. And lost a maternal grandmother, lost a father. Was in 5th grade when President Kennedy was assassinated. That was the first time I really saw that big thing, But what really affected me most and drove me to consider funeral service was the loss of 3 very close friends in high school. One to an auto accident, one to circumstances that feels to me like it could have been that he took his own life, but it was never talked about. And then the other was a good friend of mine, Larry. From kindergarten on, we'd been best buddies and we ran cross country together. He was walking to school in his junior year and died of a heart attack on his way to school. And I remember going to that visitation at the funeral home and seeing his mother, Arlene, unconsolable, and people who didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do to help them through that time. That's when I decided that I really need to consider what this is all about. So today, as we talk about Pit Road, we're going to talk about some things that we can apply directly to our professions. And it doesn't matter if we're in the crematory business, doesn't matter if it's cemetery or funeral home alike. There are lessons that we can learn to help us improve performance, make sure we have peak performance out of our teams, and then also to inspire and motivate success. Well, as we go through and I talk about pit crews, I want you to envision your team, specifically the people on your team. There'll be aha moments when you hear this, and it'll be the best way that you can take and apply this for your business. But what better way than to really stop and say, what does happen on pit road, right? What happens in a pit stop? And so just last February, right down the road here at Daytona International Speedway, they ran a race, first time ever live on TV, for the Gen 7 cars. So take a look at what happens on a pit stop. And don't look at the car necessarily, look at the people and their movements during this pit stop.
Here come the Chevrolets to pit road. Much bigger brakes on this Gen 7 car, later braking, down to pit road speed. Jamie.
And a nice countdown for William Byron as he makes his way down with all of his teammates. What a night they had last night, the power. It was a big night for Hendrick Motorsports. The 24 is in his box, his team over the wall. They've been practicing this for over a year. Nice work so far. Regan, we'll go to you.
Well, Chase Elliott with his race car right now just a little bit tight. Worried it might get tighter, so a small adjustment for that. And your leader is Kyle Larson. That race car good, other than when cars are pushing him.
Is that crazy? 12.64 seconds, they changed 4 tires and dumped 12 gallons of fuel. And performed 73 different movements and functions and details. That's a well-oiled machine. Now, here's the good news for all of you. You don't have to do your embalming work in 12.64 seconds, right? You don't have to have a cremation done in 15 seconds, whatever it takes, right? That's the good news. The more important message there is, did you see the choreography of that? How that team worked together? The tire catchers who are restricted from coming over the wall received that tire and held it and secured it so it wouldn't roll back into the path of the car leaving. Detail upon detail if you analyze that. So what is your pit lane? This pit lane is about a little over 3/10 of a mile long. It's 50 feet wide, and it's restricted to pit crews and racing teams. You have a very similar pit road. It's looking at this. When you stop and you think a little bit about your team and how they're performing, are they performing at a very high level? Do they mirror in their own way the athleticism you just witnessed? So it's a good way to stop and really consider that. So when we do, let's take a look at a number of things. The 2 things that we saw happen in on that pit stop was they changed tires and they added fuel. And that's almost always going to happen unless it's close to the end of the race and they got enough fuel. They might just put the 2 outside tires on and call it good, right? It's grip on the raceway. On occasion, they have to also repair or maybe modify or adjust the frame because of a fender bender or whatever. And then there's that proverbial unplanned pit stop that nobody likes to have happen because they lose places in the race. So how are we going to equate this? Those are the 4 things we're going to look at. Here's how we're going to look at them, and I ask you just to indulge me with the innovative thinking to look at it this way, all right? So changing tires, one of the most important aspects of a NASCAR race, for us, it's making sure that we bring the right attitude on our team and our pit crews. And then promote human skills. We'll talk more about that. The other thing is making sure we observe the gas gauge, the gas gauges, if you will, of our team. What does that look like? Do we need to refuel? Do we need to re-energize? There's a thing called octane, and by simply prioritizing our workflow, sometimes we can even increase the octane and the performance there. Repair, adjust, modify. This is where we need to have a culture of continuous improvement in our organizations. That's what makes or breaks this team. And then finally, in the unplanned pit stop, I'm going to ask you to consider that the families that you serve are each experiencing an unplanned pit stop in the race of life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So to set this up, let's talk first, just from a diagram of a pyramid, about what goes into the makeup of a very well-functioning team and pit crew. Knowledge is something that you teach. It's when you bring on a new hire and you have to make them acquainted with your processes and how you coordinate things on a daily basis, scheduling, all like that. That's teaching. Then, when you go to skills, you're going to train those same folks on how to take that knowledge and apply it to their day in and their day out. Finally, attitude. And I'm going to highlight the A on attitude because, as you can see, it's only something that you can influence. You can't teach attitude, you can't train attitude, you can only influence it. And how do you do that? And before I move on here, I'm going to point out to you something. You can have the most knowledgeable and the most highly skilled people on your team, but without that foundation of a good, solid attitude, those things fall. You don't get the maximum benefit out of them, right? We've all seen it. I'm going to talk to myself here. We've all maybe done it. We've had bad days. Wasn't quite on my game that day. So let's talk about influencing attitude, and I'm going to suggest that it begins with leadership. And by the way, leadership is not a title, it is not a position, it is leading from where you are. Everybody has the opportunity to encourage and promote good attitude. If for one thing, it's calling somebody on it, if it's a colleague, or it's turning and saying, I don't have time to be dragged down by this, okay? It takes guts, it takes courage, but that's necessary. So leaders, all of you in this room, rise up and enter the day with a smile. Have a positive countenance about you. Be encouraging to your team in any way that you think makes sense. Show them that you care. That old adage you've heard before, they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. That's exactly what we're talking about here at a very personal, relational level. So, let them know you care. Now, how do you promote and reward human skills? Well, first, let's talk a little bit about what human skills are. There's a few of them. Not all of them, but a few of them. These are people who are willing to be coached. These are people who are on time. These are people who are getting ready for that arrangement conference 30 minutes in advance because they want to be well prepared and ready to be on their game. It's those incremental things. These are things you can't teach and you can't train, but you can influence them by how you approach it and also by what you do to promote and reward it. So how does that look? Here's it. Thank you. I recognize what you did with that family. I thank you for being so well prepared that it went off without a hitch. Fantastic. And then when you have a team meeting, make sure that you're recognizing appropriately just the little things about good human skills that you're seeing on your team. That way, everybody else knows it's part of the expectation, right? It's part of the culture of this organization that we bring good human skills. And then finally, there's always those outliers where you need to say, you got a minute? Come over here, let's have a conversation, right? And then you have that one-on-one chat. I've observed lately that you just don't feel like you're in the game. It doesn't appear that you're in the game. And by the way, from an HR standpoint, that word observe is critical. Critical. It's not personal. This isn't a time when leaders say, I got a problem child that I'm just going to deal with all the time. That's not it. It's not a personal thing. It's, I have observed you coming in late 3 times here in the last week and a half. Is there something we need to talk about? Is there something I need to be aware of? That helps you build a case in your files, and it's necessary that you observe and that you can articulate that back to the employee. Uncomfortable conversations for sure. Here's the secret. The secret is what Simon Sinek said. You don't hire for skills, you hire for attitude. Okay? I think we've heard a little bit of this before with the prior speaker or two. You can always teach knowledge and train skills, but you can't train or teach attitude. Now, that speaks easy, it does hard, because you have to be more intentional. It takes more time. So here is what we would recommend to you, and that is be in the mindset of always recruiting. There's a couple good things that come from this. You can network with clergy in your community, with other business leaders in your community, with your high school or VOTEC people, or your JUCOs, and say, hey, I am looking for a quality young man or woman to come and work for us. It takes time to build that network and to screen that. If you're interested, on the back of your business card, and by the way, on the back of your business card, for anything that you want a little bit more information about, just say what it is on the back of your business card and give it to me before you leave here. And I will make sure that you get a PDF of the material here. I'll make sure that you get handouts that might support that. But one of the things I do have is a series of 8 questions that helps you integrate those questions into your interview process and hire for character. And it's actually set up as a guide where you can know what to watch for when you ask that question, okay? Always be recruiting. So when it comes to changing the tires, a critical part of the race, you want to make sure that you're influencing attitude and promoting and rewarding human skills. By the way, you notice I didn't talk about money. I didn't talk about gift cards to, anywhere. That's not what it's about. You don't have to pay money for this. It should be an expectation as a part of the culture of your organization. Now, let's talk about adding fuel. Again, it's really important to observe, how are your people doing? You're coming off of 2 years of COVID. We are coming off of 2 years of COVID. It's been a challenging time. And what do we see? We see fuel tanks dipping almost to the empty mark from time to time. How do we provide encouragement? And is there an octane level that we can boost performance if we simply prioritize our time a little better? Here's some symptoms of stress. I won't go through them all, but is somebody a little bit more overly sensitive right now? Are they more irritable than they used to be? In your normal scheme of business volume, were they one way and now all of a sudden because of the increased volume and stress that they're another way? These are things that are early warning signs of greater concerns, physical concerns. And you know what happens when they're out ill? You have to have the rest of the team pick up the slack, right? Yeah. And then, God forbid, they become disabled or even more so, struggling with life-threatening circumstances. You don't want to go there. So it's important to recognize that. How do you address that then? There are some simple ways that you can look at this. You can provide positive messaging that we've already talked about. You might consider, is there an opportunity that we can get outside the box, so to speak, and think flexible schedules to accommodate our people? What about healthy snacks? Instead of bringing in donuts in the morning, how about power bars and veggie trays or something like that? Healthy stuff that doesn't just give a sugar high for about 90 minutes and all of a sudden then you're just falling off the cliff after that, right? I'm trying to do the same thing that I'm preaching, okay? We have a leadership and management program for new people coming up in the ranks of organizational leadership for funeral homes and cemeteries and crematory operations. And a couple of the things that we encourage there are daily huddles, where you bring the entire team together and review for 5 or 10 minutes what that day is going to bring and what we need to do today to prepare for tomorrow and be on board. Everybody's on the same page. The beauty of that is when you're thinking a little bit about the stress impact of what we're doing day in and day out, even the nature of our own business, the beauty of that is nobody feels like they're on the road alone. They're part of a team, and they're working together. The one-on-one check-ins is where I might go, Dwayne, how you doing this morning? Everything good? Everything good at home? You know, you have those kind of conversations, and all of a sudden, they know that you care. And then your open door policy becomes something that they act on much more comfortably. Here's some things you can encourage, perhaps even more on a selected basis as opposed to the team. Encourage exercise, disconnecting from phone and media and technology. One of the things that works best with people under heavy stress is to help them think ahead, plan ahead on some things that they would like to do. Believe me, that keeps them from getting into a more severe crisis that we call mental health issues, okay? We want to keep the blinders on a little bit moving forward, looking ahead, what are the opportunities. By all means, leaders, don't micromanage during periods of high stress because it becomes a multiplier of that stress to that individual. And secondly, when you're encouraging people, don't hound them about it. Don't say, if I've told you once, I've told you twice, get out and exercise, man, you need to lose some weight. Well, no, that's probably not going to help matters as well. So I mentioned mental health issues. Here's some early warning signs of that. I'm not going to harbor on this, but I'm going to say that there's two things that you can do. One is to make sure that you have an association with a local mental health care facility or person that you can glean information from and work with and refer people to. And then the other thing that is probably a must-do, and that is for everybody in this room to check the health coverage that you have for your people and make sure that there's appropriate coverage limits for mental health issues. That's what you can do as an employer and make sure that you're caring for your people in that way. Now, I mentioned Octane. There's a very simple thing that often of us overlook, and it's right under our noses. And it's, how do I prioritize the urgent and important? When I'm calendaring important things into my day or my week or my month, and you want to make sure they get done, how do I do that? So I'm going to walk us very rapidly through what Franklin Covey company has indicated as a time matrix. And this is not new. Some of you have probably seen this. I will tell you that the theory of this goes all the way back to, it's one of the first times I realized it. I didn't witness it personally, just so you know, but before he was president, Dwight Eisenhower used this when he was general, okay? And this is how he delegated. So there's 4 quadrants. You can see at the top, there's a horizontal axis of the urgent and the not urgent. And then there's the important and the not important on the vertical axis. So there's 4 quadrants. The first one is those necessary things that must be attacked immediately. That's the urgent and the important. It's when that family comes to you 45 minutes in advance of the service and says, we've decided to change the emblem on the front of the memorial folder. That's urgent and important. It's also unforeseen events and things like that that crop up. You and I both know that those are never going to go away. They're always going to be there to some degree or another. The goal is that when we start thinking about how to prepare for those things, that we have a plan in place, or that we are preventing those things from happening by our regular work scheme ahead of time. Quadrant 3 talks about distractions. Now, these are urgent, but not necessarily important to you or important to that family you're serving right now. These are things that fall into the bucket of needless, unnecessary, irrelevant, other people's big issues that's important to them, but it's not important to you. Here's what Dwight Eisenhower did with these. He said, I will delegate that, or I will tell them I don't have immediate time to respond to that right now, but I will respond to it then. Now, if it's a family, because this is going through your mind, right? Because it goes through mine. If it's a family and it's not that critical to you, but it's urgent to them, the family isn't always right, but they're always the family. So that's when you make a decision. Am I going to deal with that myself, or do I have someone on staff in my pit crew that I can pass this off to and deal with it right then? Those are little decisions that you are accustomed to making every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So no difference. Now, here's the one that kind of hits us below the belt on occasion, and that is that quadrant 4 of waste. These are avoidance activities, trivial things that we occupy our time with. Time wasters, gossip. The big word here is excessive. Because I'll be honest with you, I enjoy a good football game or a baseball game on television, and that's relaxing. So it's not a time waster for me. It comes in the not urgent but important to me to be able to re-energize myself because of all of that stuff that I enjoy. Same with all of you, right? So where we really want to live is in quadrant 2. All right? Quadrant 2 is where we get optimal productivity. It's where we do proactive work. It's where we skill build. It's where we plan for those unforeseen events that happen in Q1, where we can say, all right, we got a plan for that. If that happens, we're right there. Does that make sense? So I think you can agree, I think everybody in this room would agree, that if we can get rid of excesses that waste time, we can get rid of that quadrant. And then is it possible then that we can possibly move that Q2 so that it takes up a little bit more of our valued time? Now, don't get frustrated, because the first time you drop a big rock like this into your calendar, there's going to be 3 calls overnight, and that'll go out the door. So think big picture. Don't tighten things up that I'm going to accomplish 5 things this week. Take the most important thing that falls into a Q2 bucket and put that one thing for that week. And then calendar time. And if you get it done on Monday or Tuesday, great. If it doesn't happen until Thursday or Friday, you still have an opportunity to fulfill that, and you'll finish the week feeling great, accomplishing something. So the goal is that it would look more like this. So you can encourage your team all the way through stresses. You can also fall back and say, there's an opportunity to manage our priorities and get this thing right. Let's talk about repairing and adjusting for just a little bit. This is an area of continuous improvement. I am all about that. I was very fortunate in my career to have it grow over time. And I have the great opportunity to go around and share both sides of the desk with fellow professionals and learn from you and carry that forward to other people. And I love it. But I'll tell you what, I still get butterflies when I get in front of people. And it's still something that I need to make sure that I am on my game. So I'm constantly improving. I'm constantly having people review the material and offer suggestions and listen to me speak and give me ideas of how I can improve. That's the same way in the funeral home. And we have a problem in funeral service about role playing, don't we? We just don't want to do it. It's like cutting teeth. Well, what I'd like to share with you is a way that you can make it happen in a very comfortable environment. So when I talk about skill building, I'm talking about it beginning by you creating a safe learning environment. Here's what I mean by that. There's no failing grades. In fact, failing forward is accepted. It's important to get together with colleagues and practice what you're doing. That's the only way you get better and continuously improve. And this can be cemetery maintenance people sharing among their team how I can get better at doing the work of keeping that garden well done. It's arranging. It's tips and tricks for embalmers. Cremationists, the same thing. How to maximize the effort and the benefit. We like associate teams, meaning within the same discipline. So put funeral directors together. Put receptionists together. Put embalmers together. Put cemeterians together and have them work this. Have one singular objective for each exercise. And don't do 2 exercises back to back. It's the rule of one, the simplicity of one. One thing. And there's a book out there. If you'll go to Amazon and Google one thing, you'll see it. Pick it up. It's a great read. It's an easy read. But there's value in that because if we get to trying 2 or 3 different things all the time, what we end up with is doing 2 to 3 things mediocre, and we don't really land on the essence of the one. So pick one, and then a couple weeks from now, come back and do another exercise with the other. So frequency of the routine is up to you, but there's a little bit of guideline for you. Monthly is good. Maybe every other month is fine for your organization, but to establish a culture of continuous improvement where people expect it and know that's coming, then you need to be prepared to do that. Here's what the model looks like. So you've got that singular objective. Then you need to address and communicate the WIIFM for every associate that's working on this exercise. That's the radio station that every one of us listens to, whether we know it or not. It's called What's in It for Me? It's the benefit. What's in it for me? Well, when you get this process of helping families move into the selection room more fluidly, and you communicate what you need to communicate to get that done efficiently and effectively, they're going to look at you as being more competent than what they do otherwise. They're going to feel better about your leadership of them and your help in arranging that service. So you communicate that so that you know what the benefit to the family will be, the organization, and that associate. Then, here it is, leaders. They need to see what the desired outcome looks like. I'm a visual learner. When I see somebody demonstrate something effectively, then I pay attention and I say, I can do that. That's a shorter putt than I thought I would do. Now you have to recognize my last name is Shank, so I don't do a whole lot of putting, okay? So, I don't get too many people inviting me to their foursome for a round of golf. But yeah, my idea of good golf is how far people can shank it off the tee into the next fairway. So you demonstrate it. You show them what that desired outcomes looks like. Then you give them an opportunity to try, and then you give them some feedback. Now the feedback isn't, well, you really screwed that up. Let's try it again and try to get it right this time. that all of a sudden is an unfriendly learning environment, isn't it? Here's the feedback loop. It's 3 questions, and you start with the person who was delivering the exercise, and you ask them the question, what went well? Where did you really feel like that presentation sung? And you give them an opportunity to respond. And then you say, where did you get stuck? Did you feel like you got stuck? And if so, where? And they will self-identify where it just didn't run smooth for them. And then the last question is, if you had it to do over again right now, what would you do differently? I trust that every one of you already feels the tension go in a skill-building exercise when you do feedback like that. And then the observer, the other participant, says, are you interested in knowing what I observed? That's the way you create that very comfortable learning and safe environment. This is what the model looks like. If you want more detail on how to actually do a skill-building exercise with your people, we recommend 3 disciplines doing the same thing. Again, on your business card, call this one out, hand your business card to me. I will be happy to email it to you. By the way, when you give me your email, you're not going to get tons of information from Johnson Consulting, okay? This is free stuff for you. A rising tide lifts all ships. Our whole attitude with these presentations is to rise all ships, okay? So we won't hound you. We will follow our direction. So have a mindset of continuous improvement. Create a culture of continuous improvement so that your people know that that's an expectation. Now let's talk a little bit about unplanned pit stops. This is an important criteria because the families that you serve are encountering unplanned pit stops in the race of life. There's a couple things that we need to stop and we need to recognize when we think about how we run our businesses today. And that is that we're paraprofessionals. We wear a business hat for success, and we wear a heart hat from the standpoint of significance. We can be significant in our communities by being a resource for deaf education and for helping families honor the life of their loved one beyond their comprehension and expectation. Now, we're really good with the business side. The sustainability factors on the success side are these: how you deliver customer service, your workplace environment, your marketplace position, and your financial stability and sustainability. We can talk all day long and twice on Sunday about all of those and feel really good about ourselves that we're hitting on all 8 cylinders. On the other side, when we're thinking about significance, those are matters of the heart. The sustainability factors for the heart are these. It's how our staff cares for that client family. It's how we bring empathy into the equation. And it's how we focus on the why we do what we do rather than the what and the how. When we get the significance piece down to where we're as fluent in that area as we are on the success side, now we're talking some real dramatic change and effect on the communities that we serve. We're great, as I indicated at the first, of delivering sympathy, where we can tell a family, we are so sorry about your trouble, your loss, your circumstances, and we're here to help you in any way possible to make that easier and better. Now, from a grief standpoint, one of the things that is errant in that messaging is that the last thing we should be doing is helping them make it easier to grieve. because everybody needs to grieve from the gut up. Any grief counselor, any grief therapist says it's work, and it is. Where we lag behind slightly is in dealing with empathy, where we're able to share someone else's feeling and walk with them through the emptiness and the silence and the pain of their loss after the services are completed. We can do a better job at that. I've experienced an unplanned pit stop very recently. I met my wife, Rhonda, at a 2-year Christian college in Kansas. And very, very shortly, we became best friends. We met there 50 years ago in August. And what was an interesting story at the time was that she had a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend, and we would get together and have a cup of coffee or something, and I would ask her how to handle my situation with my girlfriend, and she would ask me how to handle things with her boyfriend. And that's how we were best friends, and we ended up knowing so much about each other. Then after those 2 years, when we graduated, she went back to New York State, where her home was, and I went back to Northern Illinois, where my home was, and I started working in a funeral home. And then we ended up, both of us, providentially in Wichita, Kansas, and we hooked up. We worked together as counselors in Young Life and counseling high school kids in that Christian organization, and ended up going to the same church. And before long, we realized that being best friends wasn't sufficient. And so we got married in December of '76. And we had a beautiful marriage. We had 2 kids. They're married and have 3 children each, so we've got 6 grandchildren. I like to say we've got a starting 5 and a cheerleader, because there's 5 boys and the last one was a girl. Thank God for that, because she has brightened the day. I retired from Batesville in June of 19, as you heard, and then just prior to that, we had moved to Arizona, so we were closer to kids and grandkids. And we enjoyed 10 months of just fantastic time. And then January 28th came, when Rhonda had a normal colonoscopy, and the doctor had felt a mass when he was doing that, and it turned out to be ovarian cancer. 5 days later, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And this is 8 weeks prior to quarantine for COVID. That was an unplanned pit stop. So when we got that diagnosis, because we'd lived in 7 states and had friends all across the country and family as well, we jumped onto Caring Bridge and started chronicling our walk through those health crises. I had surgery, removed the prostate. I'm cancer-free today, and I praise God for that. She wasn't quite as fortunate. Chemo, surgery, major surgery. It had metastasized within the region, and then more chemo. Then 11 months of remission. And the oncology team said, "We bought you months." And it felt like years. It felt like years. And yet there was still COVID things that we couldn't just go do stuff. And she was immune deficient. We just couldn't just launch out and go. So there's a lot of things that we wanted to do that we just didn't get done. Well, we started to travel last June, about this time. And we traveled all the way through the end of July at different trips. And on the very last day of July last year, that cancer came back angry. You know, one of the things that we rarely see is the impact of loss. We rarely see it, we can hardly imagine it, nor can we understand it. So I want to take just a couple minutes, and I want to paint a vivid picture in your mind about what your family's experienced. Because when that cancer came back, Rhonda was in the hospital 4 out of the coming 5 weeks. And when we tried to do chemotherapy one more time, she wasn't strong enough to do it. Went on hospice, and she died September 26th. Some good friends of mine gave me a book called Every Moment Holy. It's a liturgical book, and in it is a liturgy about losing a spouse. And as I shared just a few little phrases to kind of describe what that feels like, be in a preparation mindset for your celebration of remembrance that's coming up at 11, okay? But here's a few words that spoke to me, and I hope they speak to you in terms of the essence of loss. I don't feel as if by this loss I have been reduced to one again, but as if I were now some ragged half, a salvaged piece of a thing torn apart. This is a grief like no other. Our hearts and lives were knit together. We shared purpose, planned days, nights, and dreams in a common pilgrimage. We were becoming what neither of us could have been alone. And now I'm left sorting out, through her absence, in my emptiness. It's beyond all comprehension that my closest friend and ally has vanished from this world. I am unmoored and adrift in the spaces we so recently shared. I pray for grace from the God of love and hope, of mercy and sympathy, who knows my hurt, my grief, my loss. He grieves for me and shelters me and weeps showers of comfort on me. Our faith endured us and sustained us through those periods of anxiety. And it's that same faith that I hold on to today, that I will one day see Rhonda again. This is an anguish that's multiplied by the fact that I've lost the single companion I would have been quick to share this sadness with. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't fix grief. You don't move on from it. Moving on from it means you leave someone or something behind. What happens with that grief is that you learn to live with it and move forward with it. And I can tell you today, confidently, that there's not a day goes by that I don't see her. Because she lives on in all the better parts of me. So I ask, with that information, that you consider a call to action. A call to action that does 3 things. Start talking with your staff, with your pit crews, with your team of people and associates at the funeral home. Start talking about the essence of what you're doing from an empathetic standpoint. Make sure your aftercare program is active. Bring somebody onto staff to help you with that, if necessary. And be the community resource for death education and care in your community. Have a library, do webinars, speak publicly on it. Make sure that people know that if they want death education information, you're the place they go. Empathetic funeral service begins with this understanding, well said by Dr. Wolfelt. To be rid of grief would be to extinguish the love that lives within us, and that, as it should be, is not possible. And I'm a testimony to that. So, influence attitude, focus on human skills, encourage your team, manage priorities, have a culture of continuous improvement, and serve with empathy. I can't thank the Southern and the GCA enough for this opportunity to be with you. I encourage you to go forward and serve well. Thank you so much.